Bill Belichick, who is the most successful, accomplished coach in the history of the sport, and the Patriots have parted ways after 24 years. And even if you knew this was probably coming, and even if this is probably the right move for both sides, which we can argue that it is, it's still crazy. It's still surreal. Bill Belichick has been the head coach of the Patriots for about as long as I have had consciousness about the NFL. I remember vividly rooting for that Patriots team so hard in the Super Bowl against the Rams because I liked underdogs. At that point, the Rams were familiar. They were a fixture. It's like, this is no longer fun. I don't care about this.
They already won too.
Yeah, they already won one. And so watching a team that was a 2-touchdown underdog win that game was incredibly exciting. And over the last 2.5 decades, Bill Belichick has been so many things to so many different people in the context of this sport. He started as an underdog with those Patriots teams. Then over the next 4 or 5 years, he was a visionary in everything that they did. They won 3 Super Bowls in those 5-ish years. Then he was a villain when it was Spygate, the way he carried himself. He's been a curmudgeon in the way that he's handled the media. He's been a teacher in some of the ways that he's talked about the sport. You think about those Notes app tweets of him explaining just the minutia of the game to people and how much everyone enjoyed that. And he's probably the best historian of the NFL that we currently have. If you go back and watch that NFL 100 show on NFL Network, or just some of the way he talked about players from out the league's 100-year history, his perspective on stuff like that is just different, more engaging, and more dynamic than just about anyone else. He has been all of those things in the last 2.5 decades. And now, for the first time since we've really thought about the game, he is no longer the head coach of the New England Patriots.
It's something where you always knew it's going to happen, but when it just happens, you go, oh. And it also felt like this for years. It felt like, just because this is how the Patriots were, the Patriot way and everything, that he would have a successor and it'd just be a clean break. It would be just everything always ended kind of rosy, So it was like, that's how that kind of felt, even if it was, he ended up becoming like the emperor and all that kind of stuff. But also Nick Saban retiring too, which is it's just everybody just hit all at once.
They're just inextricably linked forever, rightfully so. Yep. So that all happening within one single day is just absolutely wild.
For me, watching Belichick and the Patriots and everything, I was always cheering for the NFC for a little bit, and then got to cheering for the Jaguars for a few years, and I entered the AFC and had those matchups against the Patriots. The Jaguars did, the one where Brady went 22 of 23 and all that type of stuff, the divisional round. But to me, like, as kind of a I was more of a draft nut growing up, and then became more into the coaching X's and O side in high school as being a quarterback and everything. And I was really into Urban Meyer's offense at Utah. That was, I thought that was so cool. Yeah. But then I was a freshman in college, and after Moss got traded to the Patriots, that's when I appreciated the offense, because I was always an offensive guy. As I've gotten older is what I've appreciated Belichick on the defensive side, as a true just defensive game plan guy, as I've understood scheme more, as I've understood the actual intricacies of what he does. Anyone could say Patriot way and just go, yeah, they did it right, didn't they? I mean, Tom Brady does help. Where I think Belichick, to me, has stood up and what he made an imprint on my life is rules, game planning, game plan management, game management, clock management, the draft management. All that kind of thinking to me was so cool in the 2003, 2004, 2005.
He really was a visionary. Like, there's no way around that. You can throw any on and off Tom Brady splits as you want to. The amount of different types of Patriots teams we saw over this 25-year run, that's what's remarkable to me. Right. Think about what they looked like with who were the running backs on that early team, on the 2001 team, and the way that they used to run the ball, just like and crush people. Kevin Falk on those teams.
Who's got 2 references on the Athletic Football Show feed this week.
Corey Dillon, just like those teams with Corey Dillon. And then in 2007, they introduced, I think they were the first team in NFL history to take a majority of the snaps out of the shotgun. They pretty much introduced the concept of a modern slot receiver into the league with Wes Welker.
The ones that were gun heavy, and the Patriots went from an I formation. They had 3 fullbacks on the roster. I tweeted it one time. In 2000, the Patriots had 3 fullbacks on the roster.
3 fullbacks. And then they go to this spread out shotgun approach in 2007. They take the league by storm. Think about those 11 and 12 Patriots teams with Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez, and how different those teams felt, even though the language and the model of the offense was the same. And that's why they were able to so deftly do that. that. And then on defense, think about how many different versions of the Patriots we saw. A 2-gapping version, a 4-3 version, they'd go to the 3-4 version. How many types of players succeeded in part because they were in New England? 2 I would go back to. Dante Hightower being kind of a perfect expression for what the Patriots felt like during that time. He was a 250-pound off-ball linebacker, and he could do that, but he could also line up on the edge and rush the passer. And guys like Patrick Chung, who were phenomenal in New England, and then he went to Philly. They didn't know how to use him, and then he comes back to New England. Jamie Collins was like that. We used to joke about that these guys would go somewhere else, get paid, and then come back to New England for $1. But Belichick having a sense of how to deploy those guys who maybe were unique in their skill set, that's what was so cool. And there were all these different types of Patriots teams, not only year to year, but week to week. Yeah. How specific those game plans should get. And there really was no one like him in how he devised all of that stuff.
The defense was one of a kind. I mean, Flores is the only one that runs something somewhat similar to what he ran in the 2010s, I should say. Dean Pease was the defense coordinator in this defense for a little bit. They were doing everything. They really, like you said, he knew how to game plan week to week. I heard a story one time. I just remember the story as I just was talking in this sentence. I was driving a player around when I was with the Falcons. He was getting his medicals, and he was talking to another player in the back, and they were talking about a game that they were both in and how windy it was. And this former player, and I wish I could remember who it was a defensive back though. And he was telling Belichick was on when they came off the sideline because it was so windy. He said, anybody on the right side of the field, do not care about the sideline. Play everything inside the numbers. So on the fly, he's just literally telling them almost like high school ball, or not high school ball, little league ball. Hey, the quarterback can't throw to the right. Like that. Okay. So we can just do some funky. It's not a real coverage, but the fact that like Bill Belichick, that's how he would like just coach a game and just go, it's too windy. He literally can't throw out there. So like, just don't even worry about it. Just move inside, like move like a baseball outfield shifting. But I also think of the players, modern players. I think of you talk about the unique personnel. There's so many guys that be like, that guy's perfect for the Patriots, the pluggers, the rusher. Yeah. And I always love that. It's like, well, that's cool when the guys have a type, but also Kyle Van Noy. The story of Van Noy talked about after he got cut or traded, I think from the Lions, Belichick came up to him. Van Noy was telling the story that he was like, spinning the whistle, and he goes, always get my guys. And Van Noy and that Patriots defense was perfect. He was that little Swiss Army knife, and same with Kyle Duggar. But one last personal story though. I don't think my dad would mind me telling this. When my dad got fired in 2005 from the Vikings, or January 2006, whatever it was, the first person outside like the team, like the first other coach in the league, any coach that reached out to him was Bill Belichick. Wow. And he said, it was like, I can't remember if it was a letter or a call, so I don't want to mix it up, but it was the first guy. And he said, hey, Mike, thought you did a great job, or thought you did a good job. I hope you get a second crack at it like I did. And that has always stood out to me. I know. That's really cool. That's so Belichick will never do wrong by me because like those types of little touches is like what I just think of some of the cool stuff that some of these legends do that people don't realize.
On the Playmakers podcast this summer, McVay said something to Jordan. He said, I'm just astonished, and this is a paraphrase, but I'm astonished at the discipline it takes to come back and do this every year in the way that he does, and to do it for so long, and to come to each year with the same level of discipline, the same level of focus, and starting over again every single time. And this summer, I told Sean when we were sitting there, I was like, when you said that, I was just nodding along so hard, because it applies to everyone. Yeah. It applies to every job. Every year when we do this, it's new. And to have that level of discipline, to just completely ignore everything that came before and talk about it that way. That was last season. This is a new season. Yeah. And to just refocus and recommit yourself over and over and over again. It's astonishing. It is an unbelievable just level of human discipline. Like that's what it is. And that's what he exemplified all of the time. So let's go from the eulogy to the practicalities of this.
Yes.
It was probably time.
Yes.
If you look at where the Patriots are, and if you look at how the last couple of years had gone, I understand making this decision in this moment. You're going to have a ton of cap space next year. The resources are bountiful. You have the number 3 pick in the draft in a year where you could potentially get a quarterback. And the model that they had followed, especially the player accrual model over the last few years, the way the front office worked, was broken. There's no way around that. They had no talent on the roster. So at a certain point, you have to either take that away from him and just have him be the coach, or you just have to start over. And I think in this moment, this is the correct decision from both sides to just say, this is clean. This is it. Let's just turn the page. So I get it happening in this moment the way that it did.
I know he's too much of a legend to do it. It's almost I wish he could just be the Wade Phillips to some young offensive coordinator. You know, just that defensive coordinator. He'll never do it, never. But I was just that would be like just to me the ideal. Hey, you're the game management stuff. I will never go into a meeting on the defensive side. But you're right. We've talked about it before. As soon as those special teams started fading, I was like, oh boy, because that's the I love the phrase, and you nailed it. There was the canary in the coal mine for it. And like, but watching that and watching those details kind of fade away, what they were known for, that's when you're like, okay, maybe this whole thing needs a whole refresher. And also,
so this is the question I was going to ask you. Then, do you think he can still do it? Like, if he gets hired and he's just the coach,
okay,
he's just the coach. He has a normal GM. They have a traditional setup, because this is one of the two questions that has been bouncing around in my mind. If he goes somewhere, do you think he can still do it?
As a coach, yes. If it has to be,
I think so too.
But it has to be that right situation,
and he has to find the right offensive play caller too. That is the biggest decision to me.
Is there some? And he has to get outside his tree. Yeah. That would be the number. If I were the owner hiring him, I'd be like, hey, you can't just bring a McDaniels or O'Brien at OC. We need our version of a Slowick, a Bobby Slowick. We need one of these guys. So you got to refresh it that way. We have to make a merger of some way. I would think almost that like with the Falcons when I was there, bringing in Dan Quinn, and then it was the Shanahan guys on offense. So you had the Seahawks guys on defense and the Shanahan guys on offense. You have to make that kind of merger.
I think that makes sense, because a lot of guys have done that, where they've looked, who gives me problems? That's who I want to hire. And I think along with the inability to add talent to the roster, which is undeniable, how insular the decision-making process on offense became was the other thing that ultimately doomed him. So if he can take both of those things away at this next stop, the guy can still coach defense. He can still coach his ass off. So is there a setup that could potentially work for him? I'm fascinated by it. I wouldn't want him. If it was my team, I would go in a different direction, just because I fear the downside, but I'm fascinated by whether or not it could work.
I am too. I want to see it happen, but again, I don't cheer for any team, but it's just like, I'm curious where it ends up, because there's some interesting situations that would not, I don't think, be good fits for what he is. It's almost like he has to step into some vet team, and that's where you have to go from there. Yeah.
The other question I wanted to ask you, what do you think they do? Do you think that they blow this up in terms of the vision of the franchise, where they go outside? They go to a different system and personnel. They go outside the building to find a coach? Or do you think that they're going to try to refresh the Patriot way? Do you think they promote someone they kick someone upstairs? It's already on the personnel side. They give Gerard Mayo this job. Mike Vrabel, to me, feels like adjacent to that. Yeah. I'm wondering how close they stick to what they've always done.
That's it. This is a franchise that hasn't done anything, but that's also, that's Kraft giving Belichick carte blanche.
Yes.
Do whatever he wanted. He was one of the few guys that could just, the other guy that retired is another one that could literally just do whatever they wanted. Hey, we want 25 guys on IR, and you're going to have to pay all the injury settlements. Oh, okay. Yep. Sure, coach. Yep. Just tell me the check. Okay, cool.
And that's why this is a good job, by the way.
Yes.
Because you have that from ownership. So even if you're following Bill Belichick, and even if the roster right now doesn't look very good, it's a blank slate.
You're going to get loyalty. Yeah.
You're going to get loyalty. You're going to get time. You're going to get resources. And you're going to get support.
And that's why I don't know what Kraft's thinking. Because, Vrabel seems like a very interesting hire. And you can say, hey, he hasn't been part of this system for the last. So you can kind of bridge that. Mayo is very interesting, of course. But it's just, I'm very curious. I really don't know what they want to do, because I could understand all the paths they take.
We're going to have a lot of time to talk more about this, but we had to spend a good chunk of it.
And they have the number 3 pick.
Ever done it. And they have the number 3 pick. So they could absolutely pick a quarterback if they want.
Dan had the fantastic stat. It was like the first time they're picking in the top 5 in since
it's 1994. It's 94. It's Willie McGinnis.
Unreal.